So George McLean moved to Tupelo, Mississippi at age 29, having never lived in this town. There he bought a newspaper and began to use Lee County being the home of Tupelo, as a laboratory. What followed then is a remarkable story. It's a story of transition, a story in which this small, struggling community became a model. Indeed, by the 1960s, the United States Department of Agriculture labeled Tupelo as the model for rural development in the United States. Here are the basic premises of Tupelo. First and foremost, you take the position that if you want a better community, you'll have to do it yourself. Local people must invest their time and their energy. No one else is going to come in and do it for you. A second basic principle is that all humans have enormous talent and ability. And you want to engage these people and use them in solving their own problems. You don't need to have experts. You need to have local people committing themselves to this. Education becomes the vehicle by which you extract the kind of talent that lies within these people. Then you begin to organize and mobilize. You raise the question, what are the challenges that we face? Who are the people that have faced these same challenges and done better with them than anybody else? You go there, you get that information, you borrow, and you adapt it and place it in your community. You start with simple tasks. Tupelo invariably works on two things. They have short-term goals. A simple one might be just simply to make your place more attractive, and they do that. And then they move on to say, well, how do we build a sustainable economy? They recognize pretty quickly that they invest in themselves. They invest in education. They invest in people. People are their greatest assets. And doing this, the community has in fact been able to transform itself, to move itself from one of the poorest communities to a community that became a model to be used throughout the United States and to a certain extent throughout the world. I've taken the principles that we found in Tupelo and checked them in other communities. Will these ideas work? Can we take the principles of the Tupelo model and take them out to other places? I've actually taken these ideas to 30 different states. And what we found is the ideas work. They work. They can be seeded. The next thing that I did was to say, okay, what about communities which has never heard about Tupelo? How did they transform themselves from being an ordinary community to an extraordinary community? And I spent almost a decade looking at these communities, learning their lessons. And what I found was it essentially reinforced the idea that the ideas in Tupelo work, and they work very well. One of the most important steps forward that Tupelo took was to establish leadership classes. Similar, in fact, to the leadership classes of which you're a part. They began these leadership programs in 1949 with the idea that they were not going to be necessarily unusually selective. They had the confidence in the people that if you give good people good information and access to assets, they'll do the work. And so they have. They're not driven by experts. They're driven by people who've committed themselves to improving the quality of life in their own community. I've had the opportunity to look at your program with the Ford Institute and RDI. I've written leadership manuals myself. And I can tell you that you've got one of the finest programs that I've seen in the United States. It's first rate. You've got good resource people, and you yourself are the kind of people that can go forward and transform your community. I wish you well on that journey.